But first, I'd like to bring in Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. He's a member of the House Judiciary and Oversight and Reform Committees. Congressman Raskin, thank you so much for joining us on this Sunday.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Judiciary Chairman Nadler has been urging caution among Democrats regarding impeachment, saying that he won't rule it out, but he doesn't want to jump the gun before Robert Mueller and Bill Barr testify. And you have said before that impeachment shouldn't be a fetish nor taboo. So my question, Congressman, how frisky are you feeling?
Well, I think Chairman Nadler's done a terrific job of keeping us focused on the task at hand. We shouldn't be afraid of any part of the Constitution, but we understand that impeachment's an extraordinary remedy for extraordinary circumstances when there are high crimes and misdemeanors committed by the president. There's no doubt that obstruction of justice is a high crime and misdemeanor. That's what Bill Clinton was impeached for when he told a lie about having sex by the Republican-led Congress back in 1998. It's what Richard Nixon was charged with shortly before he resigned from office. So obstruction of justice is right in impeachment territory because of its solemnity and seriousness. Said that, we are not going to descend to that Republican standard from the Clinton impeachment. They impeached Bill Clinton over one lie about a private act of sex, and I think we understand that high crimes and misdemeanors in our constitutional system relate to offenses against democracy, the character of democracy, and so we just need to see a lot more. I bet you less than 2% of the American people have read the Mueller report now, and what we need to do is to hear from specific witnesses who will be able to tell the story so America understands, and we also need to recontextualize this in terms of the general corruption and abuse of power that have characterized the Trump presidency.
What do you expect to get from the unredacted report? What do you think might be in there that could get you and your colleagues off the fence?
Well, the great thing about redaction from the standpoint of the redactor is nobody else knows what's under there. One passage that jumped out at me when I was reading it was Mueller wrote that there were two cases in which the Trump campaign met directly with emissaries of Russian intelligence and Vladimir Putin. One was the famous Trump Tower meeting where they had promised to hand over some dirt about Hillary Clinton. And the other was ... redacted, completely blacked out. So I think that's something that we would like to see, but there are multiple episodes like that running throughout the report. We'd like to see all of it, and we have a right to see all of it. When Leon Jaworski turned the information over during Watergate, when Kenneth Starr turned the information over during the Clinton hearings, it was Congress that got to do the redactions for everything, the classified material as well as the grand jury material. The difference here, of course, is that we've got a hostile attorney general who essentially has resigned as the chief law enforcement officer of the United States and is acting as a consigliere and a propagandist for the White House.
Your chairman says that Don McGahn will be called to testify, and he has already indicated you want to hear from Robert Mueller as well as William Barr. But what specifically do you want to hear from each of them that we haven't already heard or read in that report?
Yes, well, he would be the lead witness that I would be calling. You know, there were 10 episodes of alleged obstruction by the president into the Mueller investigation. I think, reading it myself, it looks to me like maybe 6 or 7 of them really were obstruction or attempted obstruction. A few of them could be explained in other ways. But this one really jumped off of the pages because Don McGahn was the White House counsel. He was the lawyer for the White House. And President Trump ordered him to call over to Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, to fire Special Counsel Mueller. And he called repeatedly. He issued that order. And it was only because of the crisis of conscience experienced by Don McGahn, the White House counsel, and the fact that he prepared his resignation papers that stalled it, that prevented it from happening. And this was one of the cases in which I think Mueller says that basically Trump's subordinates saved him from completing obstruction of justice in a number of cases, but he certainly was attempting it repeatedly.
So what would you ask Robert Mueller? You have him in front of you. What do you ask him? What do you want to know?
Well, I think we need Mueller to explain to the country the legal reasons for his not forming an ultimate conclusion on the legal question of whether or not the president obstructed justice. He was bumping into two legal doctrines held by the Department of Justice and by his boss, Attorney General Barr. One was simply that the president cannot be indicted while sitting in office, which is pretty much a run-of-the-mill legal judgment in DOJ. The other, far more controversially, is Attorney General Barr's rather unique position that the president of the United States is essentially above the law and can never obstruct justice because he sits top of the law enforcement function. Facing that, Special Counsel Mueller said, I'm not going to render a judgment on the ultimate legal question of whether there was obstruction of justice. Also because since the president can't be prosecuted, it doesn't give him a chance to answer. So I'm going to hand the whole issue over to Congress. But what he did was to give us a huge plate full of evidence of efforts by the president to obstruct justice. And that's why we have to act now. And we're going to have to fulfill our constitutional oath because all of us swore an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
You're right. So there's a lot on your plate. Hope you have a big appetite. Democratic Congressman